Hi guys, welcome. My name is Stevie Morrow. I'm with Options Technology. I'm the CEO for them, and we're based here in Belfast. We have a large contingent here in Belfast. In fact, most of them are sitting up in the front row, I'm glad to say. But we've about 120 people in Belfast out of an organisation that's 550 strong. So today I'm going to talk to you about private AI in the capital markets. It's a wide and varied audience today, so I'll spend quite a bit of time just explaining most of the words in that title. I'll kick off with capital markets, indeed what that is, what that means, why that's important, or why AI is important to that, what the word private means and all of that. So basically I'll take you through all of the words of that title. So capital markets, it's really the financial markets, it's the money markets, it's a global market. It's not one single market, it's many markets. Who plays in that space? So this is the large investment banks, hedge funds of the world. Still primarily focused in where you would expect, which is New York, London, Tokyo. But depending on the asset class, there are many more locations around the world. From Singapore, Hong Kong, Toronto, Brazil, Paris, Frankfurt, the list goes on. So we are actually in over 65 data centers around the world, and we have all of those data centers are connected by high speed, low latency, highly resilient network. And that's essentially what we offer to our clients, the ability to deploy in any of those locations and trade in and be active in those capital markets. And when we talk about capital, obviously money, what does that mean? So we talk about being asset class agnostic, which is a very fancy way of saying we don't really care which asset that our clients are trading. And those assets can be crypto, equities, commodities, fixed income, FX, really anything in the world. So one of the defining features of that space and of those markets is obviously data. And when we talk to our clients, the amount of data is truly vast. So we manage, deliver, host, supply, store huge amounts of data. So whenever you start to put data together with trading, and none of this trading anymore is done by guys standing in an exchange shouting at each other. All of this is electronic trading. So whenever you take that factor along vast amounts of data, you can start to see why AI would be of particular importance and is having a huge impact in this space. So AI is particularly good at consuming large volumes of data, is particularly good at making sense of that data, and is particularly good at interpreting in it and providing answers to people. So you can start to see why our clients and ourselves would be very interested in putting all of these things together. I'll also touch a little bit on why does that need to be private. Usually when we talk about private AI, we think of user and maintaining user privacy. And companies being uber paranoid about corporate secrets, leaking of data, leaking of trading strategies and information. So private AI is particularly important. So I've sort of set the scene quite a bit. Now I'm going to see if the clicker works. And it does. So we're off to a flying start. So we've touched on each of these three things. So it's the AI benefits. You can see why AI would be a benefit to companies within this space. We've talked a little bit about the vast data sets that are employed by the companies in this space and how that overlaps with AI. And then the IP, which is essentially the intellectual property, the models and trading strategies that are developed. So really, private AI sits at the intersection of all three of those areas and is very important. So we'll deep dive into a little bit of that. The benefits of AI are really creating a new arms race. And I think that's a new arms race, not just within capital markets, and within this space, you're already starting to see this, that on a geopolitical perspective, there's an arms race in terms of who's going to control AI, who's going to control the models that sit behind AI, and that has real implications for all of us sitting in this room, but also has implications for our clients, and who's going to benefit the most, and who owns the infrastructure that sits behind the AI. So we're already seeing that arms race, and an arms race in our space, I use that term, it's perhaps a weighted term these days, but there's always been that drive for who's got the best CPUs, who's got the lowest latency networks, who's got the fastest software. So this is just yet another iteration of that, but we're certainly seeing it for the first time play out on a geo-social and geopolitical emphasis as well, as to who will own the AIs that sit behind all of this. So we're seeing AI having these massive impacts in all of these areas.
Yeah.
There we are. I don't know where I'm pointing at to click. There we go. So I mentioned earlier the vast data sets, and I'll provide a little bit of context. So I'll put this slide up because it looks cool and behind me, but also just to give you a little bit of context about when I talk about vast data sets, what does that mean? So we often hear the terms big data, and in a lot of industries there is vast amount of data floating around, and that's typically why AI particularly works very well for us, because it's very good at being able to manipulate and crunch that data. So to give you some context as to just how vast data is in our world, I put up some figures here. The Opera market data feed. So Opera is the options market, and this is one particular feed for every single exchange, for every single marketplace around the world. There are hundreds and hundreds of these feeds that are pushing out market data, and the banks, the hedge funds are what consume that, and that's what drives their decision. It basically drives everything they do. And a lot of the exchanges these days, this is where they make their money. They no longer charge for trading. They no longer charge as much for listing, but they do charge you to access this market data. So to give you a sense of the scale involved, Opera, which is by far the largest market data feed in the world, peaked this August at 43.7 million messages per second, which is 233 billion messages a day, every single day. To give you a sense, this is very, very, very small circle down here, which you may not be able to see, but that says that WhatsApp handles about 1 million messages a second globally. So the entire global traffic for WhatsApp is about 1 million messages a second, and Opera is pushing out 43 times that every single second. So it's just a vast scale, and if you consider that some of our clients, some of the hedge funds, are taking perhaps 10, 15 years of back data to exercise their models, the scales are just massive. I'm a bit click happy. So that's a little bit of the background to this. So getting into what it is that we do and what is options approach to this particular space. We are currently developing something that we refer to as Horizon AI. So this is very much in our R&D, and we have a number of clients currently using this. The great thing about doing anything in AI is you're probably one of the first to be doing it, because it's just such a new technology and it's moving at such a fast pace. And this is a great example of it as well. So to give you a little bit of details on what that is, we have deployed NVIDIA's Grace Hopper superchip. So this is one of their latest superchips, and this is Jensen. He didn't personally deploy it, but he does own NVIDIA. And this is the very cool chip that they've deployed. It really is at the very cutting edge of what NVIDIA are doing at the moment, and it is very, very dense compute. But we have deployed one of these in New York, and in the world's largest financial data center. It's right in the heart of New York. And on it, we've deployed a number of open source LLMs, which have been the latest change really in the technology landscape that represents AI. We all know OpenAI. We've probably all used OpenAI, ChatGPT, but it's a closed proprietary LLM, and that gives a lot of people great pause for thought. Certainly, a lot of our banks and investment companies which want to leverage the power of AI, but are very concerned about uploading information into OpenAI. And indeed, you should generally be very concerned about uploading your information into OpenAI. And a lot of our clients are very concerned about locking down access to those public LLMs, because you just don't really know what and how they're using those. So one of the real benefits of having an open source LLM, that likes of Llama, for example, produced by Meta, is that you can download that and run that yourself. So they have put all the effort, time, energy, and considerable amounts of time and energy and money into producing those LLMs. The power then becomes, can you download those, upload them to a very large computer, like the superchip, and effectively run that in a private space and control what accesses it, what data you use to train it, and how it gets deployed. So that's exactly what we have done. There are a number of open source LLMs on the market. We've run a number of them, probably looking more closely at Llama at the moment, but we have deployed the compute part. We've deployed the open source LLM, and we've deployed it in the key location. And then, having done all that, we've built, which is what we believe to be the world's first secure LLM as a service that has access to market data. There are certainly other people doing LLMs as a service, but there is no one that is combining that in this space with the market data in the way that we're doing. So we built this. This is literally the front end to it, where you can log in, you can deploy your own compute, you can load different market data into that, and suddenly you as an investment bank or a bank has access to all of the power of the LLM, but you tap into the underlying market data as well. Okay. And then finally, what we've done is demoed or built our own AI agent, which is essentially just a chatbot that you can interrogate the market data. And this is a live example of that. I had a little demo, but it's very small font. But this is from a live demo where we've essentially loaded 10 years worth of historical data into it, and you can interrogate that data just as you would, and simply asked it questions. In this example, we've asked, what's the lowest trade price on June 3rd? And it's gone into incredible detail where it said the security with lowest data price is bond. That occurred at 9:38 and 43 seconds. The second lowest price was given as literally 10 points of analysis and data, completely unprompted and unscripted. We're all very aware of what ChatGPT can do, but this signifies some of the power of what you can do by giving it just vast amount of data and doing so in a private, secure environment and asking it questions. And that's it, guys. That's mostly a background in terms of what we do, what space we play in, why that's important, but also what we're doing here in this private AI space. I think you'll see an awful lot more of the terms private AI, because for me, and we've spoken a lot about AI around the world, and we've done a number of conferences on this, and the questions that keep coming up again and again are privacy, and how does it deal with privacy, and how do we really know how the data is being used. And I fully sympathize with those worries, concerns. OpenAI is a great product. ChatGPT is a great product, but I personally have huge concerns as to how they're training those models, how they continue to train those models, how they're using our data every single day to further train those models. So I do believe that this represents, the next evolution of how we're going to use AI is how do we deploy these in a more secure framework? How do we deploy these in a way that we can protect users' data? The AI will have a massive implications for not just the financial space, but education, health, and really that's where we should be hugely worried as to what the privacy implications are and why we need to work out how to leverage this technology in a very safe way and be able to protect that. And I think that inevitably means how do we deploy this in different ways, not just rely on 2 or 3 very large companies to develop these models. And that may sound unfair because they're the ones pumping billions and gazillions into developing these, but once they have, how we actually use them will become incredibly important. And this is a really good example. These are problems that we're solving for the financial world, but I think has wider implications. So that's me, guys. Happy to take any questions.
You mentioned the fear over privacy. Are there any consumer AI platforms that you would say are better than others, so like Gemini versus ChatGPT, or are there ones that we should be more or less concerned about?
I think I'll speak privately, maybe more than from a company perspective. Personally, I've found I try and use a lot of them. I've found that some of them are. I strongly suspect that from a privacy perspective, they're all of a similar vein. I don't know enough about what happens behind the scenes. Those are proprietary models that you're feeding information into. Now, that's the negative side to it. I think they are wonderful tools, and I think that each of them have some of them are better at certain things than others. What I find to be very powerful is if you get one to check the homework of the other. So if you are producing a lot of copy, a lot of text, it's often useful to get Gemini to check the other's work. Because I think Gemini seems to be a little bit better in terms of the softer skill sets than ChatGPT. I think ChatGPT is very good at historical, factual based stuff, whereas Gemini seems to be a little bit more softer. So that's how I found personally using it. But in terms of privacy, I think I'd have equal concern amongst all of them, to be honest.
Thank you. Entertain costing.
So I use ChatGPT to write trade and view indicators for me for things like that, which is great, but I use it as a search engine more than anything. But if you're talking about your system and you're building these private closed AI systems, what sort of cost are you talking for? If anybody here has got a big business and they want to try and implement one of those, I know it's got to be, there's nuances with the amount of data you're putting in and how often you're putting stuff in. What's the cost? Are we talking millions? Are we talking hundreds of thousands? What are you?
More than millions. Yeah. There's nothing cheap about anything to do with AI other than using the very, very tip of the iceberg. Look, it's a classic drug model. They get you individuals hooked on using this thing, but to actually service your addiction and needs, the sums are massive. We are talking about download open source LLM. The ability to produce these large language models, to produce what Meta, OpenAI, etc. have done, is off the chart. There is a good reason why Microsoft is talking about producing its own or opening its own nuclear power plant, and that's the key driver to this. Power is by far the biggest cost involved in producing these. For us, a business, the chips are expensive.
Vans.
Oh, well, we hope it'll be a very large bill. So, yeah, look, this this is so new. It's such a fast-moving pace at the moment. We are in full R&D mode at the moment, and we're letting clients use these things for free. So we've invested, probably hundreds of thousands at this stage to deploy this type of environment. That where this becomes relevant for us is the ability to scale that, make that multi-tenant. Can we create one large platform and allow lots of clients to use that, and we get economies of scale out of that? So at the moment, this is an expensive solution. It's hundreds of thousands put together. But again, we have some of the benefits of working in the capital market space. Our clients usually have quite deep pockets then to that end. So it's a considerable expense. But with all these things, I've never, ever seen a technology that moves as fast as AI. We're very used to technology cycles moving in years, if not decades. If we take the internet, obviously for an example, but this is moving in months. So the costs are shifting, and the technology is shifting in a matter of months, not years. So it's a very interesting time to be part of it.
Anywhere of the dark, said, good.
I'm just a bit confused now. So I understand the need for privacy, but I also understand that these LLMs are learning from everybody else's. So there's power in sharing, and you even said there now, considering several customers using it, that defeats the idea of being private. The benefit of several people using it is each customer benefits from the other customer's use. So how do you juggle that privacy versus sharing and the gain from sharing?
Well, the devil's in the detail to that. It's what you're sharing and what remains private is key there in that multi-tenant world. It's one thing to have the large language model, the big brain, if you will, sitting in a secure, so offline mode, if you will. So once we take an open source LLM, it's taking it offline and setting it somewhere secure. Now you can train that, you can further train that with your own data, and the secret will be in segregating that data. So the data of customer X is using the back-end model, sharing that back-end model with customer Y and customer Z, but the data that they're using to train it and infer new information from remains separate. So that's the holy grail in doing this, is not sharing the back-end brain, but making sure that the data remains segregated and separate. And that's the same in our world. It'll be the same in private health and education. The key will be making sure that the data that enhances the models remains separate, private.
I've one, Stevie. Read up a bit on private AIs just in anticipation of today. How much of your private AI has written itself in terms of code? Have you got there yet?
Should ask Michael that. He tells me he writes all his own code and he never uses ChatGPT. He hasn't even heard of it. 0%. Yeah.
0%.
Yeah, 0%. Well, I think, again, personally speaking, that's the really interesting part is where do we, up until a year ago, everything on the internet was entirely human generated, was the sum total of, you could argue, human endeavor and intelligence. And that changed, that changed to some of that being artificially generated. And where is the tipping point? Ever since 18 months ago, 2 years ago, where ChatGPT launched upon the world, a lot of that information is now being artificially generated. Now, you could say it's just regurgitation of human intelligence, but it's still being artificially created. So where's the tipping point? If that's the snake eating itself, I think that's a really interesting question. Where do you draw the line between what's human generated and what's artificially generated, and where does that become potentially a problem? So,
and who owns it?
Yeah, and who owns it? Well, we know who owns it: OpenAI and Meta and Google. and Microsoft. But I don't know if that answers your question, Marty, but it certainly
No, it certainly does. Certainly does. Thank you.
Anyway.
Well, that's, yeah. You only get one shot at Stevie Morrow, folks. That's great. No, no.
So when it comes to private AIs, your main clients would be big banks and hedge funds and such. But what options would there be for, say, like individual consumers and investors to like really like take advantage of this private AIs? Would you provide options for them to maybe give them the potential to take part in this new technology?
Well, I think like any technology, there's massive barriers of entry to it at the start. And those barriers of entry soon disappear, costs soon decrease dramatically. So, I do see a world where very quickly where we move away from having 3 or 4 very large public players who are controlling the access to AI, where the development of private AIs helps to democratize this as a technology, helps to drive those costs down considerably, and where it's realistic for individuals or small businesses to take their data set and apply this to a model and get tremendous results out of it. So I think this is the natural progression and this private AI will help drive that, where this becomes incredibly cheaper and probably in an incredibly short period of time. As I say, the technology cycles are ridiculously short on this. So I do see a time where this will help democratize that as a technology, and this will become much more accessible to individuals.
You get a list. Why not for you?
Well, again, I'll revert you back to the previous, tens of thousands that opens lots of doors. So we can definitely work something out, sure.
I think this our straight right. You're
Free for now. Free for now. Davey, thank you so much. Guys, thanks very much.
I mean.